Hello, my name is Colonel Pete, and I'm the founder and president of the Tocqueville Liberty Institute. And today I'm going to tell you why I started the Tocqueville Liberty Institute and also the reasons why I bought my first 40 Bitcoins. Then it cost me $500 to buy 40 Bitcoins. That's right, you heard me right. But it didn't occur just overnight. I didn't wake up one morning and decide, hey, I think I'm going to buy Bitcoins today. No, it happened over a gradual process. And I want to tell you about what that process encompassed and why I decided to buy the Bitcoins. I went looking for Bitcoins. It didn't find me. It wasn't a thing that I just, buy some Bitcoins. So I bought some Bitcoins. No, it wasn't like that. I went looking for it. And the story started with George W. Bush in 2008 when he signed the TARP bills, the Troubled Assets Relief Program, a $700 billion bill he signed in order to bail out the banks in New York. Now remember, 2008 was also the time when we had the Great Recession, when the real estate market crashed and a lot of subprime mortgages failed. So the banks were in kind also failing, and so George Bush bailed them out with taxpayer dollars to the tune of $700 billion. And I had a visceral reaction to that. I thought, no, you can't do that. That's wrong. But I couldn't explain why it was wrong. So I set out to do some research and study and educate myself on why I felt that it was wrong. And I came across a website called the Mises Institute, MISES.org, Mises Institute. And on it, it introduced me to the concepts and principles of Austrian economics. Now, along the way, I also learned more about Keynesian economics, which is the default economic system that U.S. uses today. And I also learned about history of our banking system in the U.S. And I'll go back in history now. In 1832, President Andrew Jackson was in office at the time. And the second bank of the United States was our then central bank. And this charter was coming due. It was going to expire in 1832. And there was a bill in Congress that was passed to renew its charter. And President Andrew Jackson vetoed it. So the Second Bank of the United States charter expired. Therefore, in 1832, the U.S. was without a central bank. So from 1832 to 1913, the United States was central bank free, and Americans have learned to dislike central banks during that time. In 1910, Senator Aldrich Nelson, or Nelson Aldrich from Rhode Island, assembled a group of men at a train station at night in New Jersey, all under the guise of pseudonyms. They weren't supposed to use their real names because they didn't want to be discovered who they were and what they were doing. But they were all interests from different central banks, different banks of in the United States and also Europe. And on this train, they traveled down to Jekyll Island, Georgia, where they met for several days, and they crafted a document that would eventually become the Federal Reserve Act of 1913. Now remember, 1913, we were without a central bank still. So this bill was passed in 1913, even though it was written in 1910 by these men in Jekyll Island. And what is Federal Reserve? It's a private bank. That's right. Its ownership is private. We don't know who the owners are specifically, and it's never been audited also. And that's where Ron Paul wanted to audit the central bank, but he was repeatedly defeated in passing in those resolutions. So the central bank, then Federal Reserve, lent money to whom? To the U.S. government. What does a bank require of its lender? Collateral. So besides good credit, you also need collateral in order to be able to repay your debt in case you go default. You have some goods that are valuable. Central bank was established, and we didn't have any collateral except for, what's the best collateral? The American people. That's right. In 1913, the 16th Amendment was passed in February, just before the Federal Reserve was established in December. So in February, the 16th Amendment was passed, giving Congress the power to levy taxes, income taxes, on the American people. And fast forward to 1927, what happened? Great Depression took place. And in 1933, President FDR was in office. And he wanted to establish a number of programs in order to help the American public to recover from the Great Depression. But what he lacked was money. The U.S. was in the Great Depression and therefore was hurting for liquidity. And if you remember, back then, the U.S. dollar was based on gold, $20 an ounce in 1933. So what was the best course of action for President Roosevelt? Back then, they didn't have the practice of printing dollars wantonly like we do today. So the only thing he had was to be able to acquire gold. But we couldn't just acquire gold. We couldn't mine gold that quickly. So what he did, he signed Executive Order 6102, making gold ownership by the American citizenry a federal crime. Everyone had to turn in their gold bullion. Their gold coins were to be turned in to the federal government. Now, you could keep your numismatic gold or gold jewelry, heirlooms and all. But gold coins to own was illegal. It's a federal crime. Fined by $10,000 then, or 10 years in jail. Do your math. $10,000 in 1933 was a lot of money, especially given that gold was $20 an ounce. By the way, after we confiscated gold in 1933, gold was immediately made to be worth more dollars, meaning the dollar was devalued from $20 an ounce to $35 an ounce. So the dollar was devalued by about 40%. So in 1933, you had to turn in your gold. And fast forward to 1941, the U.S. entered World War II. We were bombed by Japan in Pearl Harbor, and so we entered the war. Now, wars aren't cheap. They're expensive. And so how do we finance that war at the time? We financed it by using war bonds. We sold war bonds. American public could buy war bonds to lend money to the U.S. government. At some point in the future, the U.S. government had to repay the bonds with interest, by the way. So we did that in 1940s for World War II. Near the end of the war in 1944, the United States and several of its allies met in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. Bretton Woods was a place where they also agreed upon a system called the Bretton Woods system, whereby they made the U.S. dollar because it was as good as gold. It was based in gold. It was based on $35 an ounce at the time. So that meant that in order for France to buy goods from Spain, they had to convert their francs in order to be able to purchase goods from Spain. And then Spain can later take the dollars and convert it back to their pesetas to be able to spend domestically. So the U.S. dollar has become the reserve currency of the world. It's a great thing for us. And it'll mean several things later on, you'll see. So in 1950, we entered the Korean War. And the way that we paid for the Korean War was by printing dollars. We printed money. That's right. It wasn't based on more gold confiscation because they had all the gold in the world already in the United States. So the only thing that they could do was based on the limited number of gold ounces, tons, they could print more money. And what did that do? That made the U.S. dollar that other holders in other nations worth less. So the French dollars and the Spaniard dollars and the Swiss dollars became worth less. Not worthless, but simply worth less than they were a day before the printing of these dollars. And so France and Switzerland said, hey guys, that's our reserve currency, and you're devaluing our reserve currency by making more of it. So tell you what, since in our agreement in 1944 at Bretton Woods, we've agreed that central banks of foreign states could redeem their dollars in gold. So come on, give us our gold back. So in 1971, instead of shipping gold back to France and Switzerland, President Richard Nixon said, I'm closing the gold window. So the dollar is no longer going to be based in gold. It's going to be a fiat currency based on the good faith and credit of the United States government, thereby closing the gold window, and the redemption of dollar in specie is no longer allowed. So in 1971, the dollar became an official fiat currency, meaning it's based on the fiat of the United States government, or the good faith and credit of the United States government. In 1974, Richard Nixon signed the Executive Order 11825, nullifying or repealing Executive Order 6102, signed in 1933 by FDR. And gold became legal again to own in 1974. So this is the process by which I came to think, I think I understand better because I follow the money. That's right, follow the money. So about the same time I was learning all these facts, I came across an article about Bitcoin. And about then, I was learning about money, monetary system, monetary policy. And what is money? Money is simply a medium of exchange. And in order to be a good money, it has to have 5 characteristics. It has to be 1, rare, 2, fungible, 3, divisible, 4, portable, and 5, durable. It has to be all these things. And I thought, well, I just read this article about Bitcoin, and Bitcoin's all those things. So Bitcoin may make a good medium of exchange. So in 2011-ish timeframe, I decided that I would buy some Bitcoins. And Bitcoin back then wasn't on Coinbase. It didn't exist then. So I had to go and search for Bitcoins. And I found an exchange. Don't remember what the exchange was, that sold Bitcoins. And so I decided I would put $500 into it. And I said, hey, easy come, easy go. So I bought 40 Bitcoins then for $500. And that's really the journey by which I came about buying Bitcoin. And I thought, I was reminded that the Matrix, remember the Matrix movie? You could either take the blue pill and go back to believing what you were believing happily, or you take the red pill and discover how deep the rabbit trail goes. And so I think I took the red pill by understanding these principles and the history behind the United States and its monetary policies. And I think it's allowed me a better understanding of the world events and the current events around the world, because you now view it with a different lens. You see it now as money flows. Everything happens because of the almighty dollar, not because of anything else. Now, you may hear we do things for these great altruistic reasons, but ultimately, I think it's going to be all driven by the dollar. Now, John Adams said early in our founding that our form of government, our Constitution, is wholly inadequate except for a moral and religious people. That means we have to govern ourselves. That means that while we practice free market, the accumulation of self-interest and wealth, we also have to do so with fellow mankind in mind. We also have to look out for the poor and the widows and all, so that our republic might continue to persist and endure. And that is our risk today. And that is why I also started the Tocqueville Liberty Institute, so that we might be better educated, re-educated, if you will, on the principles of our civic responsibilities, so that we as Americans can continue to preserve this great republic that we've enjoyed for many decades. And I wanted to persist and endure, so that our children and children's children might continue to enjoy this freedom that we have. Thank you for following me so far. And in the following episodes, I will probably talk more about what I mentioned in this story and go deeper perhaps. So anyway, see you next time. Peace out.